And for more, as we approach the 20th anniversary of the Long Island Massacre, we are joined by Charlie Minn. He's producer and director of the documentary called Long Island Railroad Massacre, and it opens today. Charlie, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You know, I remember covering this. I remember at the time the outcry that came out after it, because it was to that point in a pre-9/11 America something people couldn't even consider. And it was the worst violent crime before, obviously, September 11th that we had in recent memory. Did it open old wounds for folks when you talked about this? I know you got a lot of the principals involved who made it pretty clear to you there has not been such a thing called closure since this, but I'm curious, the reaction from the principals nearly 20 years later, what was it like?
Well, after 20 years, things change. Some people open up more. Some people are still very reticent about the crime. The victims that took part wanted to take part. They wanted to represent the person that they lost, a loved one, and they were very frank. And these interviews are gut-wrenching. The interviews are from the heart, not from the lips.
It's a personal thing for you, too. You knew one of the victims, went to school with her, didn't you?
I went to Herrick's High School in New Hyde Park, which is 10 minutes from the massacre. Mi Kyung Kim, a fellow Korean, was executed that day on the train, 27 years old. She was pursuing a film and TV career at the time, and she lost her life along with 5 others, and 19 others were wounded in the attack.
You know, Charlie, I'm curious, because this had so many issues at the time. Obviously, this is a mentally unstable guy here. We're talking about Colin Ferguson, the issue of guns, access to guns. If anything, so many of those telltale signs that we saw that happened that day, that played out at the trial, etc., you see them. You see them at schools today in tragic shootings. You see them in mall shootings. You see them in so many things, the one commonality being access to a gun. For the people you talk to, and I guess there's uniformity, they're shocked 20 years later so little has changed in terms of policy, what bothers them most?
Just that here we are sitting 20 years later asking the same tragic questions. How could this happen? Why did it happen? And here we are sitting 20 years later. You have Virginia Tech, you have Aurora, you have the Naval Yard in DC, Sandy Hook. I mean, if Sandy Hook doesn't do it, then I don't think anything will. What is this country waiting for? Babies to get murdered? I mean, when is enough enough? We can't even protect our children today. And these people who are complaining about we need more guns, they could be next. They could be the next victim of gun violence. And Carolyn McCarthy, who you mentioned earlier, she's been fighting the NRA for 17 years. The NRA, I mean, that's like going up against the 1998 New York Yankees. She hasn't passed many laws. It's been a very, very brutal fight for her, but she's hanging in there because she wants to represent her husband and her son, who was given a 15% chance in living, and he survived. The NRA keeps saying it's the person, not the gun. Let's say the NRA is right for a second. Let's say it is the person, but you still need a gun to do it. So this whole thing is a mockery.
Talk about some of the other people. If people get a chance to watch this, they'll see Lisa Gambati, 7.5 months pregnant at the time of the shooting. And while there's been so many tragedies, there's also miraculous cases, and I guess she'd count as one of them.
Yeah, Lisa Gambati was shot in the hip. She was 7.5 months pregnant, and in the x-ray they showed where the bullet landed. It was in between her spine and the baby. The bullet was lodged in between the two. So you talk about a miracle. And Lisa Gambati, thank God she's alive, and she's in the movie. She's very prominent, representing her daughter and telling everybody what happened on that train. As I said earlier, the interviews are just riveting from the victims, people who are directly on the train, witnessed people getting shot or got shot themselves. Unbelievable, the interviews.
You said you did this film in part because you had a connection to it, but also it was a tribute to those victims, right?
Absolutely. This film honors the victims and is victim-driven. The effects it has on victims. We tend to glorify the killer these days. It's really getting out of hand. A perfect example is the Boston bomber. Somehow this creep got on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, this animal on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. They're asking for 15 minutes of fame, and the media is giving it to them. The media as a whole has failed. It's been a colossal failure. The victims are the heroes here. The victims should have been on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Sean Collier, the MIT police officer. And if we would stop giving these animals their 15 minutes of fame, perhaps we would see less of these shootings.
You know, a lot of people saying just that. Finally, Charlie, in the interviews you did with the Congresswoman, Ms. McCarthy, when you asked her when do you think things would change, she said she thought they would have changed after Virginia Tech. Are these people 20 years later any more hopeful? I mean, I thought after Sandy Hook things would change. Obviously, I was wrong. Are they any more hopeful that there'll be a shock to the conscience of America, that we can do better than we have right now in terms of the laws and the books?
Sandy Hook was the proof. If Sandy Hook didn't do it, I don't think anything will. You have President Obama, and I don't agree with this man on too many things, but the one thing he did say I do agree with, regardless of the politics, something has to change.
To that end here, we want to remind people they can check out this film. It's seeing tonight in wide distribution. Just go to lirrmassacre.com and you can see both locations and showtimes to check it out. And I strongly encourage you to do so. Charlie, I appreciate a few minutes. Charlie Minn.
Thank you.